start now, or do you want to wait that extra minute? We'll wait that extra minute. T-minus 30 seconds.
Oh no, now my presentation's going to go over.
Yeah, we're going to join Spaceman up there on our way to, well, not Mars anymore.
Is the video pulling the feed off that mic?
No, the video is actually going to be coming right out of there.
Because I'm loud enough, you can hear me.
Yeah, we can lose power. You can use it as a spotlight.
I actually can do it on my slides too, because you never know if the AV's going to.
What's this? Contingency plans? All right, guys, it is 4 p.m. My name is Ivan. I'll be your introducer person for the next couple of minutes. The only reason I even mention that is because I am a participant in the Free State Project and volunteering here today. I found out about the Free State Project through Facebook, of all things. I didn't realize that there was a liberty movement, and the fact that we're actually here and doing things, that's pretty cool. Found out about it in December, signed my intent, and then my company actually helped me move here the following March. So I've been here for about 2 years now. I live over on the Free Coast, which is kind of cool. But today we're actually going to be listening to Ms. Nicole. Ms. Nicole is actually the host of the podcast, Going to Be Free in Tennessee, and the CEO of Spark Freedom. Nicole actually learned at an early age the values of private ownership, personal responsibility, and has utilized those early lessons to develop a means of communicating the ideals of liberty, freedom, self-reliance, both within the liberty community and beyond.
So I'm a pacer. So you'll see me do this, and then I blank. And I can't see any of you right now. This is great if you're nervous. So one of the things I do as Spark Freedom is presentation coaching. And that's a trick you can totally use. However, it can harm your eyesight. So you gotta watch it a little bit. So where do you think the audience attention curve is at the beginning of a presentation? Here or here? About 80%? Okay, so here it is. And what do you think happens about 3 minutes in? Start looking at your phone, start wondering what's for dinner. Oh crap, I didn't register for one of those off-site dinner things. I wonder where. And then you hear these words. In conclusion, what happens? Go up to 100%. This is the best time to get your information across, by the way, in a presentation. So we call that a hammock. What do you do in a hammock? You sleep. So one of the techniques we like to use at Spark Freedom to coach is spikes. Spikes get your attention. I work with a guy at Arrowhead 3 Consulting, and a spike can be something simple like a question. It can be a story. It can be a visual. You spike the attention, and when they're about to look at their phone, you spike it again. What does this have to do with liberty? You draw a picture of something simple that you're trying to explain on a cocktail napkin. It spikes their attention, right? You know what we call that? We call it the bed of nails. And we'll get this to work. Can you sleep in a bed of nails? So I said it out in the lobby. I'll say here, if you get one thing out of this presentation, what is it? Don't be a jerk. That's it. You can leave and go see Ben now. Another thing you can learn actually has to do with Ben Armani. Watch him. He's taking on some pretty heavy topics sometimes that might piss people off, right? That guy can present like a champ. It's impressive, isn't it? Yeah, watch him. Does that mean you're going to walk out tomorrow and present like Ben Armani? Maybe not, but think about when you find yourself in one of those situations where you suspect you might be being a jerk. Channel your inner Ben. Or find somebody else that you really like that you can channel. It's I like try to think about that. Okay, so then there are two roles. I've worked in public policy for 14 years. I started out as a communist in the People's Republic of Portland, Oregon. And I had a job at a language translation company. And we did translation and training. I did the executive training. And I got to work from out of the city into the city in 25 minutes on a bus for $1.25. Walk out my door, bus would pick me up, get into town, and then they put light rail in. You know what happened when they put light rail in? They had to blast a hole through the side of the mountain, A, to get to where we were going, which took them 4 times as long on the project, right? If you can imagine that. And then they canceled my bus route. And then, so instead of like out the door to town, I had to go out the door bus across the busiest traffic possible. Sometimes it took 15 minutes to get through this intersection. Wait for a train, and an hour and 15 minutes later to an hour and a half later, I would be at work. Guess what I did? My inner libertarian that I didn't know was there started speaking to me. And it told me that at $20 an hour of outside work, I would more than pay for a parking pass. And I started driving. And then I'm talking public policy with my friend Kurt, who happened to work at Cascade Policy Institute. You know what it is? It's a think tank. Do you know what that is? Yeah, I don't either. So I had no idea what he did. Turned out they had like one of the best minds in public transit in the country on the same floor as me at work. So I'm bitching about transit, and I'm like, yeah, if I was in charge, I'd make this decision. And it struck me, and he just asked me a question. Are you the right person to make that decision? And then he left it there and walked away. 3 weeks later, I sat up in bed and I realized, if we have a system of government where I have to be in charge for it to be fair, or to work, that's not fair. And that was like my memorable journey towards becoming a libertarian. And I happened to be really good friends with this intellectual guy who like read Hayek and stuff. And I could ask him any question, and he was a drug dealer. You know what drug he dealt? Wasn't marijuana. It was liberty. He had figured out, if you're going to push liberty, you don't take liberty like a baseball bat and just whack it over people's heads. You ask a question and you let him take a step. Have a small debate, let him win. Lead with another question, tell a story, give an example. And he just was never upset. It was amazing. I've seen him upset. He's my best friend now. I've seen him upset, but he knew that his best role in the liberty movement was to deal. It was to be an empowerer. It was to show people the link between freedom and opportunity. And that was that simple. Well, there's another role we need in the liberty movement, because one of the things about liberty that's awesome, and libertarians, is they are principled people. The other role you need is the asshole. Nick's really happy to hear this right now, right, Nick? Yeah, Jack Scrippo's an asshole. Have you guys noticed that? And you know why he can pull that off? He's a grandfatherly asshole who thinks about when he's going to be an asshole. And he thinks about, is this moving somebody towards something? Does he get mad and go off the handle sometimes because he's just kind of an angry guy sometimes? Sure. But one of the ways he spreads liberty is by standing up for what's right no matter what. And you need that. The story he told first night when he was talking about being at the airport, and he was trying to get an upgrade, and this other angry dude came in and started yelling at the person working behind the computer, and he stepped in. He was an asshole not to her. He was an asshole to that guy. He stood up for what was right. It's like, she can't control that. She doesn't control the weather. You need to back off. That's the right kind of asshole to be. So, as I said, if you learn nothing else today, don't be a jerk. Or if you're going to be a jerk, learn how to be that kind of jerk. because that fits with the brand of liberty. Okay, so in support of this, I'm going to ask you a question. Who will build the roads? How do you answer that question? Come on. There we go. I had a really good time looking at libertarian memes before this, and you guys are funny. Okay. We believe that roads are for pussies and socialists, and there is no need for roads in a free society. Is that converting anybody? Is it?
I think it generates leads with cunt.
Yeah, cunt was very helpful. Okay, well, what about Tom Woods? What does Tom Woods say? He says, that's a good question. If we didn't have the government to build roads, there'd be a Sears store over there and your house over here, and everyone involved would just be standing there scratching their heads. Might that convert somebody? It's subtly different. What's different about that?
And you can say, wait, no, that's not how it works.
You're like, wait, I'd probably figure out how to get over there if I wanted to buy a washing machine, right? So to help you out, I've developed 6 principles of controlling your inner jerk. This was originally titled Controlling Your Inner Asshole, but I didn't know how the Free State Party would feel about having that in their agenda. So we changed the word. Know your audience. Decide if you're there to win or to persuade. Embrace human nature. Listen to, not through. Life is more than politics. That's going to be hard for you, isn't it? Okay, and use real stories. Use real stories. If you listen to Ben, he's telling a story approximately every 37 seconds in his speech. Watch it. It's very rare he doesn't underline something about every 37 seconds. He's probably going to be freaked out when he hears that I'm timing him though. So principle number 1, know your audience. Is it the butcher, the baker, or the candlestick maker? Who are you trying to persuade? Once you know that, you know where to start. If I'm talking to Nick, the only thing I'm trying to persuade Nick to do is at least be the right kind of asshole, right? If I'm talking to my mother, who's never even heard of Mises, that's a different conversation to have. So you want to figure out who they are, where they are, and start there. And when you know where you want to help bring them, you may or may not be successful with this, right? In every case. But when you know where you want to bring them, you have an idea of how they'll respond. So if you know your audience isn't quite there yet, doesn't care who Ayn Rand is, are you going to bring up Ayn Rand? No. Wow. Sure you don't want to go see Ben? So, if you walk up to me, how many of you, are there any atheists out here? No? Okay. If I want to convince you that socialism is the best way to go because what would Jesus do? Is that going to work? It turns out that sometimes we have the wrong experts. We have a bunch of old guys. They're white. Old white men. Have you ever heard that one? Yeah. Sometimes that works with people. I mean, at least we got one girl in there. Thank you, Ronnie. But if people haven't already decided that an Austrian economist is somebody who should be an expert, they're Keynesian, you don't start by saying, well, Hayek said, Milton Friedman said. It's not where you go. You have to start with something they can relate to. And that's, I think, the hardest thing. It actually reminds me of, I was in New York City. They had a conference called the Personal Democracy Forum, PDF conference. Brilliant name. All about how tech impacts politics. Right up my alley, right? From the policy world, I'm at this event, it's totally run by lefties. 2006, 2007. Guess who was elected in 2008? Right? And there was a lot of social capital put into that. Well, we were the weird libertarians at the lefty event. And we got invited to a meetup. You know what the meetup was? It was the Marxists. Did we go? Hell yeah, we went. Did you go? I mean, man, that was awesome. So I'm sitting there, and we're all nervous. We're like, are we going to do this stuff? Because libertarian, by the way, for Marxist, libertarian and evil, same word. Same word. And worse, I'm a capitalist. So I'm sitting there with this girl, and she's talking to me, and she's explaining about a fixed amount of capital and all of these theories about Marxism. And she's like, don't you agree that, blah, blah, blah. If you start your persuasion with don't you agree that, and it has anything to do with your philosophy, you're going to get kicked in the nuts by someone who doesn't believe it, doesn't agree with you. They'll be like, no. Well, now we're going to go. Right? So she said that, and I said, and I listened to her for a while, I just asked her a question. I said, actually I didn't say that, I said a statement. You know, we both want the same thing, don't we? And she looked at me like, she didn't bite, but don't you agree that? And I said, we want the same thing. We want people to have their basic needs taken care of. We want people to be the best they can be, to be able to creatively apply whatever their thing is to the general good of everybody and have a great life. Do we agree on that? Yeah. The only thing we don't agree with is how to get there. And her head went just exploded, and it was because I knew my audience. I knew that I could make a point. And I even got to satisfy my inner jerk, because I had so much fun watching her head explode, right? But I've always wondered where she ended up. Like, I probably didn't change her mind with that, but I love to see. Libertarian does not necessarily mean evil. We actually care about people too. You're going to hear me use libertarian and anarchist interchangeably here. I'm sorry, guys. I'm not that worried about terms. One of the ways to control your inner jerk or to persuade people is don't be so precise with your language. I've done a lot of market research, and we all have a language we use. And nobody understands what the hell we're talking about. That's what I've learned. And some words will kill people. If I come up and say anarchist, you're done. If you haven't actually spent time thinking about what that means, you just turn them off, they're out. It's just like the word liberal, right? Wish you could have that one back. We lost it, it's gone. It's gone. Okay, principle. Wait, one more thing. Wait. Now let's do principle number 2. Are you here to win or persuade? Okay, I'm gonna play a game. Stand up if you have been somebody who embraced basic concepts of liberty, however you come to it, for 1 year. Stand up. Okay, so some of you haven't yet come over to perspective of liberty, is that correct?
You just said it again.
Okay, so the question is, stand up if you have, if you've embraced concepts of liberty in your life for at least 1 year. That's the new guy, that's not the new guy. Okay, so stay standing if you have for 5 years. That's pretty cool. Sit down, or stay standing if it's 10 years. 20? I'm at 14, by the way. 30. Okay, look around the room right now. How many we got? 1, 2, she's not standing for obvious reasons, she's waiting. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Have you ever had a friend convert from atheism to Christianity? And they get really excited about it? And they try to convert everybody else? You know, that born again phase? You guys are totally out of that. So if you want to hear about ways they've used it work to talk about liberty, these are the people you should be talking to. And I'm sorry that today I can't just give you the magic words. There are no magic words. I can tell you about words you shouldn't use, but what's the most important thing about communication? Is it words? It's how you make somebody feel, right? So if you're here to win, you're going to win the, you can also down there. If you're here to win the argument, you might lose the war. Especially despite Paul, yeah. And I think that's the hardest part, because when you first come over, I mean, I remember I was communist, I was socialist, I was libertarian, I became an anarchist. That was my journey. And I guess I'm still libertarian, but I'm also anyway. It starts getting confusing even when I talk about it, right? It was a journey, and I just think that if anybody along the way had really just stomped on my head because I couldn't come to their perspective yet. Well, maybe not me, because I'm a strong bitch, but it would have just potentially turned me off. And a question, I actually sat on panels. Why aren't there more women in the liberty movement? Because when you ask a question, and this is a question I asked early on, I lived in a neighborhood that was riddled with crime in Portland, because that's what happens when the statists take over and tell you where to live. They separate people and put them in pods so they can control them. What about the police? That's worse than morose, right? You're talking about, these are the guys we pay to confiscate cash from our cars because we have more than $1,000. That we have to pay a lawyer to sue them to get it back, even though we did nothing wrong. Right? That's who we're talking about here? That sounds about right, yeah. What about, you're just out to destroy public schools. I worked in the school choice movement for, well, I guess I'm still working in it, but I came to school choice as one of my first points of entry into the liberty movement, and people would be like, you're just out to destroy public schools. And I'd be like, I might be. That's probably not the right answer, is it? Well, what's the real worry there?
Education. Yes.
Are the kids going to be prepared to take care of themselves? Because we're all going to get old, and guess what? They're in charge. That's scary. That's some scary stuff right there, right? So, you need to decide if you want to win or persuade. And if at the end of this you've decided you want to win, the rest of this talk is completely irrelevant to you. Because I want to see you win the war. I want to see you win the war. Okay. And I actually really liked this quote by Murray Rothbard. Who wants to read it? Anybody? This is something that I find inspiration from. Go ahead and read it here into the mic because it's the video.
The libertarian system is one that will at once be far more moral and work much better than any other, given any existing human values and attitudes. The more the desire for aggression disappears, of course, the better any social system will work, including the libertarian.
Okay, so if I want to persuade somebody who's really worried about freedom is scary, does this basic concept help? It helps a little bit. He's saying the libertarian system is one that will at once be far more moral and work better. But he's also saying, I acknowledge that there's aggression in the world, and it gets better and better as that goes away. So we need to address a different problem. This is actually one of the shortest quotes ever from Murray Rothbard. That's why it's in here. And so then if I want to persuade somebody, do I pull this slide up and tell them? Not if they don't know who that is. You may lead them that direction eventually, but not if you don't know who that is. And this goes to the core thing, and the thing that you need to know about your target audience. And so again, Smart Freedom, lots of market research we've done. We've worked with people that's done lots of market research. We'll do message research for issue campaigns, right? School choice, land use, like all of these different issues. And when they've figured out the words to use, they then go back and say, what are the core values? This is a typical values ladder from Frontier Lab. And what's interesting to me, this top line is what people really care about. Personal safety, serenity, entertainment, it's usually going to be security, personal safety, or opportunity, or both. So when you're talking to somebody who's not one of us, because by the way, please keep making those memes because they're hilarious. And we can totally go through a meme thing at the bar tonight because there's some good ones out there. But when you're talking to somebody who's not from here, we sound scary as all get out, right? What do you mean no government regulation? Government's there to protect us. We have to license the hair braiders, right? Some of the examples we've had earlier today, people going to jail for what? Where did I hear this story? Someone went to jail. Jack got put in jail for an expired ticket. He got an expired tag on his car that he thought had been paid off because he asked somebody else to do it for him and they didn't. He went to jail for a sticker. That's ridiculous. And he's lucky, he's white and big as shot. Okay, better move through this, right? This next one's the hardest one, embrace human nature. People buy on emotion and justify with facts. Do you guys believe me? Do some of you not believe me? I'm getting some frowny faces out there. So, do this. Close your eyes. Think of the last big purchase you made. You got that picture in your head? Was there any emotion involved in that decision? I was working with a sales team in Houston, figuring out how to better sell heavy equipment a couple weeks ago. These are all dudes. And they're having a hard time making an emotional case for, buying a crane. And they were like, I was like, you gotta make it more emotional, man. You gotta stick them, oops. You gotta stick them where it hurts. And they were like, this is business. There's no emotion in this. It's like, okay, yeah. What are you selling? They weren't really selling a crane, but we're gonna say crane for the purposes of this. And how much is that crane? $125,000. And why is it better than the other crane? Because the other crane is taking $100,000 in maintenance every year to maintain. What does yours take? About 25. Long term, what's the better decision? The more expensive crane that takes less maintenance. It's like, okay, so put yourself in your client's shoes. It's the operations guy who's got to manage the maintenance budget. What just happened? He got his budget, he's over budget, and they're pissed off at him. What happens to his bonus? No bonus. Is he going to get fired? Maybe. Is there any emotion in there you can tap into? I mean, there is more emotion than you think. It doesn't have to be starving children in Africa to be emotion. There is a lot. I mean, for me, if my bonus is at stake, you just got my attention because I was going to use that bonus to do something fun, right? So embrace human nature, and even if you think you don't buy an emotion, that doesn't matter. Why? This is the advanced part of the course. Principle number 1, know your audience and know what motivates them. If you're there to persuade, it doesn't matter what you think. It's the hardest thing in the world when you get your market research back about school choice, and you're convinced that the tax savings is going to just put people over the edge, and they don't care about that. We know they don't care about that at all because every bond measure ever that's for the children passes. It's because it's for the children, man. Okay. This is one of, so politics aside, please. And I almost put Obama up here instead for you guys. But Arthur Brooks, you guys know who he is? I don't know if he's still at the Heritage Foundation, but he was with the conservative guy, right? This is him sharing how he learned that making the moral case for capitalism was important, and we'll see if we get it today.
Last Thanksgiving, I was sitting around the table, people turned to me and they said, so, you free enterprise guy, see what's happened to the American economy, what do you have to say about that? I hear this all the time. And I said, well, I had this ironclad, bulletproof answer. Well, the only way we can lead the country back out of the recession is through fiscal consolidation and getting out of the way of entrepreneurs and tax reform, and et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And my sister-in-law, who doesn't agree with me on anything, she said, I met this little girl and she lives with her mother in a car. I don't think free enterprise is helping her very much. And it was over. It was over. I lost. The whole argument was absolutely lost. Why? Because I made the material case for free enterprise, and she made the moral case for statism. We need to learn from that. People like me need to learn from that. In point of fact, one of the things that we have learned over the past few years is that the moral case beats the material case in any kind of argument that you're going to make.
What do you guys think about that? Is he right? It's hard to admit when a conservative's right, isn't it? Okay, so then how do we make the moral case for liberty? The most compassionate people I know in this world are liberty-oriented people. Those are the guys who will come over and help me. Those are the guys who will donate to help an abused woman get out of a bad situation and not care if they get it back ever. Those are the guys who step up and take action, right? They're not the only ones, but a high percentage of my liberty-oriented friends take care of the problem. So, principle number, whatever. 4? 4. Listen to, not through. This is something we're all really bad at. What do I mean by that? Yeah.
Don't just look at them, waiting until they take breath so you can get to your next point.
Yeah. You gotta put your talking points down long enough to really listen to what somebody's saying. I asked you earlier, when somebody accuses me of trying to destroy the public schools, what are they really worried about? If they're from the union, what are they worried about? They're worried about me destroying the public schools because that's how they control everything. Okay. I'm gonna have to answer that from a union person every single time I talk about school choice, aren't I? Yeah, they're gonna stand up. What's their goal with that question? Libertarian equals evil. That's their goal. Therefore, I am evil, therefore my reform is evil. Who's my target audience when I answer them? Everybody else in the room who's not in the union. Is my job to persuade that person who just lodged that complaint at me? No. I take it through a several-step process. When somebody throws an objection at me, I listen to it, and the objection there being, you're just out to destroy public schools. I think, okay, is that true? Maybe, maybe not. What is the thing they're really concerned about? What's the real objection? Children won't get educated and won't be prepared to have a good life. That's the real, especially the poor ones. Okay. Does my reform do that to kids? No. Talk about ESAs in Arizona. Education savings accounts, like a gift card. Get this gift card, and you can use it for educational services and take your kid out of public school if they're autistic, for example, and get them the kind of education they need to prosper. Education savings account. One of the many reforms. So, is that true? No, it's not true. So what I'm going to ask back is I'm going to say, so is your concern that we'll destroy public schools? And they'll say yes. And I'll say, okay. You know, my concern is that every child gets the best education for his or her needs, and in order to do that, I think we need to have options, and we need to involve the parent back in the conversation. If you talk to teachers in public schools, one of the things that really worries them is that the parents are no longer involved, and this reform helps bring the parents back, and it helps link kids to the best education they can have for their individual needs. Did I convince that person? I may have not even convinced everybody else in the room, but they're pretty sure that libertarian does not equal equal at that point. And a lot of times you do, they're like, that's a solid answer, man. So one of the things as you're learning to control your inner jerk, think about the objections that you have the hardest time with. I used to really struggle with Coke funding, which I wish just once in my life I would get Coke funding at my nonprofit, but always accused of it, right? Like, I worked at the think tank that outed Al Gore for his energy use. And immediately, it was oil and gas and Coke. We had neither Coke money nor oil and gas money, but if I respond to that, that was just sinking to their level. And so we had to say, we are support, like we had this other answer. Well, I spent one time 3 hours in a room with a bunch of people just responding to the Coke objection. So know what they're gonna come up with. And if it's roads, be good at roads. If it's police, be good at police. And find a way to find that core. Shift it, just like Vinarmani did this morning with, was it Liberty versus License, where he turned it from, I should be able to do whatever I want, into, I don't want to tell you what to do, right? Totally different perspective. And it's a reasonable one. Okay, number 5. If you are talking about politics, come on, man. If you're talking about politics in every conversation, you're doing it wrong. You're doing it wrong. How do you establish rapport with people? You get to know them. How do you do that? Listen. You ask questions. Okay, so if you're trying to persuade somebody, who does the most of the talking in the two?
I think the other person.
Yeah. In sales, if I'm doing all the talking, I'm not going to close the deal, usually unless it was closed before I walked in the room. I want to get them talking. I want them to want it so bad they ask me for it. And then I'll sell it to them. So how do you do that? Ask questions. And a really good way to do that is to have things to talk about that have nothing to do with liberty or politics. Find some common ground. I have a homestead. That opens up. I love coffee. I roast coffee. I can talk to lots of people about coffee. I like bourbon. We can talk about bourbon. We can drink bourbon tonight in the bar too. And you can actually be an asshole to me there. It's okay because I've already converted, so you're good, right? So this can be really hard. I woke up once, about 8 years into my liberty journey in the liberty movement, and realized the only person I hung out with who was not in the liberty movement was Mark, and he was a political reporter at the state capitol. Awesome. I was like, I signed up for a winemaking course the very next day, and I joined the classical choir. I was like, this can't be. And now I have friends from all walks of life. You know what that gives me? It gives me lots of insights, right? Lots of insights. Okay, next principle. Use real stories. This one can get you through almost any sticky situation. Because the next thing that, they're gonna say roads, whatever. Well, it doesn't really work anywhere. And socialism does, because of Sweden, basically. Because they don't understand what Sweden's budget looks like. So I find real examples, and one that Jack Spirko gave to me because he came up with this idea. Citizens assisting citizens. And he doesn't run this, he's handed it off to somebody, but the idea is, what if we had a team of people who volunteered their time in a crisis to help? And the deal is you don't get paid. Brilliant idea. They went out, they leveraged all these people, and then Hurricane Harvey came along. Guess what? CAC team took donations, and as close to 100% of that as possible went to the people who needed help. And the way they did it is they found people who could take time off work, load their cars full of stuff, drive down there, and hand it out. And then they gave them some cards to buy things, like go around, find out what people need, and help them. My favorite story out of that was a nursing home that had been out of water for almost 3 days. They were starting to drink polluted, because it was flooding. It was outside of Houston too. FEMA was working in Houston. They were not working in the rural areas. So found this nursing home, nobody could get to them because the big trucks couldn't get there. And they went out there and gave them water, and one of the workers at the nursing home said they'd started to drink the dirty water, and these people probably would have died. These are some dudes with four-wheel drive vehicles. That's pretty awesome, isn't it? So when you tell me that we can't get through a crisis without the government, I've got that story. Or when you tell me that we can't get rid of the government structure because kids will be abused by their parents because we won't have the CPS. I can tell you the story. There's an organization in my state that if you're a single mom and you get arrested for drugs, you have to go to jail for 30 days or whatever. Instead of having to give your child up to CPS to be put in foster care and then take another, average stay is 2 years once that happens. So your mom was in jail for 30 days. You get shipped off to some other family. We've had incidents of kids dying through abuse in the foster families in our state because the oversight's not so good, as it turns out. Instead of that, you can voluntarily go to this group and say, I need help, I need somebody to foster my child. In order to be a foster family in that, they screen you. You don't get any money for it. You're opening your house to a child. You agree to take care of the child and give them back. You agree to let the parents see their child. CPS won't let you do that, right? So mom gets out of jail, has to start working, get back on her feet. You're there taking care of the basic needs until such a time as child can go back to mom. Does that work in every single case? No, but that's a layer where CPS does not need to be involved. And then, the easy ones are pet rescue versus your county shelter, right? Like, how many times have you seen people come together to save all the dogs on Facebook in your community? But if it goes to the shelter, what happens? 3 days later, right? So use real stories, have some good ones. These are 3 I use. I use a lot more than that. I collect stories. When I hear a story, I'm like, wait, say it again. And then on the topic of stories, I hear people tell really bad stories a lot. Do you know why? When I was talking about those stories, how much of that was happy? Like 20%. Conflict is to story as sound is to music. So when you're telling a story, in order to get my emotional response, and people buy on emotion and justify with facts, right? In order to get my emotional response, you have to hit me right here. You gotta hit me in the feels, man. In order to hit me in the feels, I need to know what bad thing could happen, so that when the good thing happens, I'm like, actually, I kind of want to see that voluntary foster family thing's kind of cool. Maybe I'll become one, right? So conflict is to story as sound is to music. So when you're telling a story, don't be afraid to live in the bad. When you're explaining why a policy solution or a libertarian concept will be better, explain the bad. People don't understand that socialism is horrid. People haven't heard the story of my Chechen friend who became a veterinarian because when he grew up he was starving. He lived on a farm that raised sheep. There was all the food in the world there, but because the government controlled the food, they weren't allowed to kill any sheep. And the most powerful man in the village was the veterinarian who came out and declared if an animal was dead or not. And they would declare live animals dead for a bribe. So you had to bribe the veterinarian to declare a sheep dead so it could be dead and stay in your village and not ship off out of the country. That guy, when he came here, became a major proponent of liberty, right? Because he knew what communism looked like. He knew what that would really do. He saw his people abused. They might have done some abusing back. But, yeah. So, in conclusion, I got your attention, didn't I? Know your audience, decide that you're going to win the war, or you're going to persuade, not just win the argument. Embrace human nature and start with emotion. Listen to people all the way to the end of their sentences, and listen to what they're saying so that you're not just thinking of your next talking point. Listen to it, decide if there's something that you need to maybe ask a question about. Remember that life is more than politics. It's a lot more than politics. It's a lot more than politics. And use real stories. That being said, if you want to have a bunch of dickish conversations with me in the bar, I will be there tonight. And we get to be really mean to each other and argue about that 5%, right? Because we find that fun. Anyway, that's it, guys. You can ask questions if there's time. Good. I tried to lose some time. Questions, comments?
Here's the question. How do you sell or convince someone of the concept of liberty if his personal philosophy is that happiness equates with power and control over others?
How many people like that are there in society? Oh, the question is, how do you persuade somebody that liberty equals opportunity if he's a psychopath who wants to control everything. Right?
Yes, that's correct. And I come from an immigrant here from a former communist country, from Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Others, and I'm sure many in America probably is not the case, but in the rest of the world it is not the case. Embrace these principles until actually.
Right. Okay, so you have some perspective there. The answer to your question is you can't. If somebody's a psychopath, they're a psychopath. Now, that being said, most people that we think are stuck there aren't really stuck there, and you need to find out what they really care about. Usually people who want the state to control things, and why I wanted to be a socialist for a while, is I cared that people be taken care of. And a big issue for a lot of women who don't want to come over to the liberty perspective is that they're worried about people being taken care of, having enough to eat, having shelter, getting medical care, and the only side that's articulating a good example of that is the other side right now. We need to get better at explaining why our safety net can be better than the abusive safety net that we have now, where cops can bang down my door, shoot my dog, go, whoops, wrong address, and they don't get in trouble for that. They can search my house for drugs, not find them, break all my stuff, and they don't have to pay me for it. Is that messed up? That's messed up. And those are the stories people don't see. They don't understand, like, in the effort to save Timmy Terminator 1 Timmy Terminator story, we kill all these other people. We kill them. Socialism kills people. It kills far more people than capitalism. And that's hard for people to swallow. And now, you know what I've just done to your friend I've just gone up and chest bumped them and said, no, you're wrong. So you gotta find a way to invite them towards that perspective. And along the way, it's okay to be a bit of a jerk and say, no, actually, like, this many people died. They starved to death because all the sparrows were shot or were killed, right? And then they weren't eating the pests and the crops died, and then they were getting starved. Like, when you find examples of top-down regulation, especially the communist countries are just rife with examples. They're great. And who are the richest people in the world? It's the leaders in those kinds of countries, right? So if you're worried about all of this inequality stuff, you're like, well, that's way less equal than what we have here. Like, if that's what you're really worried about, man, like, look at that. Anyone else? Yeah?
Two kind of quick questions. One is, with these principles, do you think they apply across a spectrum of different media? So, I mean, with social media, Facebook posts and things of that nature, and then also, do you find an ideal media, I guess, to convey messages like on a one-on-one basis, talking to somebody in a car ride, or maybe a group session while playing some board games or things of that nature? So, two questions.
So there's lots of ways to communicate with people. So the question is, does this translate across media? And the second question is, what is the best way to communicate? Right, okay. So the first one, you have to know your audience. And if you're having an argument on Facebook to the death, it's usually with somebody you're not going to convince. Usually they're a troll. And you can tell when you've run into the situation when you're talking about one topic and they like go for the misspelled word, or they totally go off topic to bring something else in because you just got a point in and now they can't address that, so they do something else. When you get to that point, I usually drop it. And I try to sound on social media when I'm arguing, I try to sound balanced and bring the message across, and then if the person is unreasonable, they're the one that looks like a jerk. And the people I care about convincing are the people who are like kind of vicariously living by checking out this argument, because it's kind of fun to watch that, isn't it? And I've watched Jack do this. He'll argue longer than I will. I usually just try to score a little, this is the thing, and usually, you know, again, I don't know how many people's minds were changing on Facebook. I think the one-on-one, so then to your next question, One-on-one, it's a lot easier to persuade. I worked with a foundation that has spent a lot of money figuring out what the chain is to persuade people over to embrace the non-aggression principle. And they figured out a sequence of conversation that within about 8 minutes, they've got it. Pretty cool, huh? Unfortunately, there is no silver bullet. 6 months later, they brought the same people back, and most of them had gone the other way again. And so when you look at what really persuades people over time, it's multiple touches, and it's consistency over time. So video can do that, podcasts can do that, conversations can do that, presentations can do that, books can do that, TV shows can, anything can do that. But it's got to be many things. There's unfortunately not one answer. One more question? Yeah. How do you persuade people that work for the government? Ayn Rand she pointed out something pretty clever. And that is the selfish motivation, right? If you take care of yourself first, things are better all around. Okay, so then apply that to government. How do you change government officials? You have to find something in it for them. Especially in local politics, you need to find something in it for them. So a place I've found that you can really push on things, the guys in the control office who are controlling the finances get really pissed off about corrupt use of funds. And so if you can find a way for them to be the hero in fixing that problem, you've won two things. Less money is needed in the budget, right? They get to be the victor, and now you have rapport with them for the next thing that you want to talk about. And they can help you find out. It's one of the best battles I saw won was right to work in Michigan. It's because they found a union member who didn't want to be in the union, was pissed at how it was being treated. And he went out and he started talking about how forcing people into unions was not going to work, it was not fair. And that helped put a lot of pressure on. So that's actually not a bad strategy at the local political level, is finding your allies. However, not everyone, if you are going after something that there's no personal investment for them to change, it's really hard. You gotta find what's in it for them or go a different way. Okay guys, I'll be at the bar with Mr. Spearco later today.
Give Nicole another round of applause. Just a quick announcement. If you guys haven't already, there are still spots left open for the dinner. Sit down, speakers, have some commercial conversations, get to know some locals.
Yes.
Which dinner?
It's obviously right outside the door. Okay, how about if I talk like this? So there's special announcement. There are still spots left for the outside dinners. Get to meet some of the speakers, get to sit down and have some good conversations with some of the locals. The registration is actually just outside this door at the table. See Crystal.
Nick didn't heckle me, he was supposed to heckle me.
One of the things that